Alright, what is up everybody? So today's video, I actually recorded the majority of it on a previous date. I went over a lot of different things to do with basically time, dates, local date time, timestamps, all that stuff. So this video has a lot of great info if you're doing any type of coding or project that requires you to mess around with dates and times. There was a few things that after watching it and trying to edit the video a little bit, that I noticed I missed. So this is just going to be kind of like a quick overview of some of the things that I wanted to also add to this video. So bear with me here. I don't want to repeat too much of what's already in here. But basically one of the things that I didn't touch on in this video that I wanted to was the zone date time. So real quickly, I'm just going to go through I'm going to open this up real quick. I'll show you the program and basically some of the things that this is going to be somewhat repetitive to what you'll see later on in the video, but like I said, just bear with me here. Alright, cool. Alright, yeah, sorry about that, guys. Okay. So, but anyway, as I was saying, some of the things that I wanted to point out in here, basically, what I'm doing in a nutshell is taking a timestamp of whatever the time is in my database, which this time has to be 24 hours. You have to set it up that way or you're going to have a lot of issues when you pull it out. So you can say here this is like 1300, 1400, so that's 1 in the afternoon, 2 in the afternoon. It's all military time. You have to do a 24-hour clock when you save your data basically into the database. And the reason that matters is because when you pull it out of the database, you don't have the option of basically pulling it out directly into a zoned time. You need to pull it out as a timestamp, and then you need to convert that timestamp to a local date time. And then if you want, you can take that local date time and basically create a zoned date time. And then once it's a zoned date time, then you can convert it to another zone. And that's essentially what I did basically inside of this step, like this code right here. So essentially what I did here is I have my formatter, which later on in the video I'll go over exactly how to do these how to create these formatters. But I'm going to focus in on the zone date time. And basically what I did is I go ahead and I pull out my start date and I create a local date time. Now the start date is saved inside of my appointments class. My appointment class, it is saved as a timestamp. So this get start right here is pulling a timestamp. Then that timestamp can be converted right into a local date time. And then once I have that local date time, I can basically create a zoned date time where I do a zone date time of this local date time that I just created, and I can tell it what time what time zone I want to use. And even these time zones, you need to kind of create those. So you can see I created this zone ID of UTC and basically just did UTC. And again, I don't know if that's completely correct. The program or the IID seems to recognize whether I use UTC or GMT. They seem to be interchangeable while I'm coding. So I mean, I've used this one just because that's what my class, my school basically asked for. This is the terminology that they're using. So anyway, I create my zone ID, and then I use that zone ID over here to tell it, to create a zone date time of that time that I pulled out. So that is how I extracted the time that is my database and made sure that it is a zone date that I want. Then after I did that, I created another zone date basically of the same exact time but in my local zone ID. And I created this local zone ID up here. You can just do zone ID of, and then you do timezone.getDefault.getID, and that'll give you the zone ID of your current local time. And the reason that I went through this little loop here is because in the program, for display, it wants me to basically use, so my location, I set it up as Asia Beirut. So that's my local time on the computer. And what I wanted it to do is when I go to view my appointments, so let's say I select this appointment that's already set up, I wanted it to display the time here in my local time. So you can see it's set up for the date. It's set up for basically noon to 1, but in my local time it shows up as 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. And that's because of basically the time difference between UTC time and my local date time. So that was one of the reasons that I set it up like that. So essentially that's kind of the one thing I wanted to show, because I was it took me a little while to wrap my head around this and really figure out how to go from a time stamp to a zone date to my local date. Because if you just take that timestamp out and you just create a local date time, then it's going to give you a local date time of exactly what's in your database. So that noon, it would create a local date time of noon, even though that's not technically when that appointment happens in my time. My time, it's happening at 3, not noon. So I hope I explained that pretty well for you guys. I think that's all I'm really going to touch on now. Again, like I said, I don't want to repeat too much of this. One other thing that I don't think I really specified in later on in the video is this formatter. When it comes to these hours, the small h basically shows hours 1 to noon, like AM PM hours. It's not military time. If you want to set up a time in military time, you need to use the large H. So right here you can say this is 24-hour time. So I had to convert. So when I save my appointments, I take whatever local time I have and I convert it to UTC time, but I also convert it from AM PM time to 24-hour time, so that when I save it into my database, I don't have any issues pulling it out. I think that is everything I want to cover right now, so I will connect this video to the rest of the video that I already recorded and just go from there. Alright, what is up everybody? So I've got so much going on in my project right now and I'm learning so much, and I just wanted to make a video really quickly on some of the things I've learned surrounding the date and time and local date, local time, local date time class objects inside of Java. So I've been coding honestly for like almost 3 hours now. My daughter's about to wake up. It's gonna be rough, but I'm gonna try to just speed through this video and try to get as many of the questions that I figured out shown to you guys as I can. So let me first off just kind of go through quickly what got me to this point, and some of the problems that I faced, and then I'll go over how I resolved them. So I'm making this project for my Software 2 class, and basically I'm trying to create a JavaFX application that basically you open up, you can create customers, you can assign appointments to their customers, and then you should be able to view all the customers and all the appointments. And of course the appointments have to have a specific date and a time. And I'm pulling all this information from a database that my school set up. So my school has this database set up. I just used a SQL script to basically fill the database. So this is my database, and what I'm going to focus in on this video is going to be my appointments. My appointments right here, specifically the start and end dates. So if you do the start and end dates, this column right here, if I go down to basically field types and I look at the start date, right? The type is a date time. So originally when I pulled this information into my actual project here inside of my database appointments, I pulled this in as a date, which it'll let you do. So you can pull it in as a date. But the problem I found with that was when I went to go view my appointments for a certain customer. So like let's say I have this guy. Actually, let's use the first one, so this is this is my appointments right here, right? So it shows his appointments. But as you can see, my end date I still have set up as a date, so it only shows the date. Whereas my start time I actually set up as a timestamp, and that shows me my date and then the time of the appointment. So timestamp is definitely preferable when it comes to viewing the appointment, because I want to be able to see exactly like what's in my I want to see exactly what's inside of my database. So I basically want, this is what I want to see when I look at my appointments. So I kind of made a mistake in the beginning by setting that up as a date. And when you do set it up as a date, obviously you don't get that time. So that was one thing that I just figured out. And yeah, so basically just know that if you have a SQL database and you have a date time column, you can either pull that as a timestamp or you can pull it as a date. All right. So outside of that, the next thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to fill basically my my combo boxes here with times, and I wanted them to look exactly how they do here. I wanted the 8 a.m., 8:30 a.m. I wanted it to be a.m. p.m. I didn't want military time on it, ironically, because I was in the military and I'm familiar with it, but it just didn't look right. And most of the time this is what you guys would be used to seeing. So in order to fill this with times that have the AM and PM and not just a actual local time, you have to actually do it as a string. But then doing it as a string also causes problems, because eventually you're going to want to pull out their selection and use that as a time. So then you have to worry about trying to convert between strings and your local time objects. The date picker is pretty simple. That's, you don't get an option. That's a local date. So no matter what, you're working with a local date object, and it's not a big problem. But what I did learn about these is that there's an easy way to format them. But when you do format them, it basically creates a string, and then you can use basically that formatting to take it from a string back to a local date, or take a local date to a string, and back and forth. And there's just a couple different things that make this a little confusing. So I'm going to go over exactly what I found out, and it's even a little embarrassing for me to kind of show you what I wrote in the beginning, because it's a good illustration of how much additional work you can make for yourself if you really don't understand the different methods behind these classes that you have and these objects that you have. And it really does kind of prove the fact that, like, before you really start doing too much coding, take the time to kind of research different classes that are already available to you and the methods in those classes and how to use them. Oracle has a bunch of stuff out there on online that you can read through that is really helpful. Maybe I'll even show you some of the pages that I read through. But essentially, when I went to go fill that combo box, right, this one while loop here does the exact same thing as all this. And what's cool about this is converting it back from a string to a local date or to a local time is 1,000 times easier when doing it this way. So if I do it this way, I can show you exactly what it does. You see that it looks almost identical. You almost can't tell the difference. It's basically all the same. However, I'm using way less code. And then, so this is basically how you're going to set up your local time. You create your local time, which in this one I have open because it's basically, opening hours and then closing hours for the business. So I have my local time, open and close here. It opens at 8, it closes at 10, and I actually put 10:01 here because I'm using it basically if I want to actually include 10 as inside my box. If you put like just 10 and then 0, then it'll stop basically at like 9:30, and I didn't want it to do that. But basically this is how you're going to set it up. The one thing you're going to need is this formatter. So my formatter I created up here. you can see that it's a date time formatter. And what I didn't realize before is this date time formatter, you can use this date time formatter to format both time, so your local time, and local date. So I thought date time formatter was only able to format your local date time object, but it's not. It can format both the local time separately and the local and your local date. So for this, I'm setting up a formatter for time. So right here, I have my date time formatter, and I have the pattern that I want to use. Now these letters, basically, some of them are intuitive, some of them are not, but you can use these. You can look up on Oracle. Okay, so yeah, search local date time. Here we go. So if you search local date time formatter in Java, this will come up, and basically this is your guide for how to basically pattern your formatter. So as you can see, I used basically the A at the end of this for PM, AM, PM. So that's basically what that means. It shows exactly what it does. So this is an example, basically AM, PM of day. So yeah, use this as a reference when you're setting up your patterns. You can also see that this right here is escape for text, which I used to just put that colon between the hours and the minutes. So essentially what you want to just do is create your own date time formatter for your time, and then you can even create one for a local date time. You can create one for your local date, and you can set it up any way you want. So you create those formatters ahead of time, and then basically you can call those formatters when you set your string object. So you want to have a string object, which is the time they entered, and that's going to be basically your whatever local time you created, and then in the format that you want. So that this is how you should do it. It's a lot easier. The other thing, like I said before, when I was using all of this, in order to take this and put it back to a local date time, I ended up creating these crazy long switch statements that basically took the index of the box that was selected and then set that equal to a new local date, which is just ridiculous. And again, it's embarrassing that I even did all this, but I'm new, I'm in school, I don't really know what I'm doing yet, and I just want to get some videos out there that might help you guys from from doing what I did. So essentially, when you want to take this back to a local date, all you have to do is basically go local date and then do parse. So this right here is creating a local date of now, so it gets today's date. It's a local date time, so it gets today's date and time, and then I created a format where I wanted the format to be in the year, the month, the day, hour, and minutes, and then AM, PM. So you can see right here, this is actually what it's going to look like. I had it set up to print it when I opened my program, and then after that, it basically so this prints my string, which is my local date now in the format of a string in this format. And then I take this string and I parse it over here and I set it equal to the same, basically say that, this is my string right here that I'm using, and this is the format that my string is in. So you have to use this formatter both when creating your string object and when creating a local date time object or a local time object or a local date object. You have to use that formatter again when you're taking the formatted string and putting it back into your time objects. So you just use a dot parse and then your text and formatter, and then that creates a local date time. And then you can see when I do system out of my local date time, this is what it prints when it's not a string. This is just when it's not like a formatted string object. It'll just print out, the date, the year, the month, the day, and then this little T, and then it says it does military time. So 14:07 is the same as 2:07 p.m. Whew. All right, I'm a little out of breath. Hopefully hopefully the insight that I kind of provide in this video will help some of you if you're working with dates and times and you're kind of struggling like I was to figure out how to use these formatter methods, if you even knew that they were there. Now you do. And also if you're using like a SQL database and you're confused about how these field types kind of translate into Java. So the datetime one kind of translates over into, like I said, either a timestamp or a date. It will not let you use like a local date or local time or local date time. So if you want the time, if you want to pull the time with the date out of the database, just use a timestamp. All right, that's it. Hope you guys liked it. If you did like this video and you found it useful, please like and subscribe. I've been putting out videos pretty consistently each week, if at least one a week. And if you're just starting out in coding, you'll probably find my videos very helpful. I'm trying to put them out now. Like I said, even though it's a little embarrassing because I'm struggling through a lot of this and I don't really know what I'm doing, I feel like I'm making a lot of mistakes that beginners are going to make, and they're going to be searching for answers. So I'm hoping that this will be helpful. I follow a lot of other developers on YouTube, and some of the videos that they make are just like they're a little bit too advanced for me at the time, and I don't want to wait to start making videos until I'm at that point. I want to make videos that other people that are just coming out learning the code can use and can find helpful, and feel some camaraderie with me as we learn to code together, because it's definitely not easy. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys today.